Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Jack Wolfson, board-certified cardiologist, and this is the Healthy Heart Show. You are in the right place if you want to know about holistic heart health and wellness. We've got the answers for you. I got some totally amazing guests that are on, and I've got one today. I've got Robert Koagedal on the show, licensed acupuncturist. He's got a booming practice in Arizona, and I met Robert many years ago. Now I know his amazing family, his wife Mary, and the kids. Just a great group of people. Usually when I see everybody, Robert, of course it's at Whole Foods, and we can bash Whole Foods all we want, but sometimes it's like the only game in town for certain things. And if there's anything that Whole Foods has created, it's kind of like a fun, healthy vibe. Maybe they're selling conventional oranges from Nicaragua, but at least it's kind of a fun place to hang out, right?
I agree, yeah. And in fact, it felt like for a while there, we couldn't go there without running into you and your beautiful family. So that was always fun to see, and especially when you know that people are putting their money where their mouth is and people wanting to support things, right, that are health promoting, and then supporting the farmers that are producing things that are healthy for us. So I think that's a big part of what I try to promote and certainly work with patients in my practice.
Yeah, and I know I certainly would prefer to see you guys at the farmers market in Old Town Scottsdale. What an amazing farmers market that is, especially for Arizona, a place where, of course, there's like no water. You can't imagine how anyone's farming anything there besides cactus. But really a fantastic farmers market. And, of course, we always encourage
it. We go there regular. We're regular Saturday morning people there, too. So another spot that at least in the desert you can access a certain quality of food. Obviously, this is not necessarily what you're going to find in other latitudes that you can grow, but at least it's what we can get here. So we're going to find it where we can.
So acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. How does Robert Koagedal get into that? I mean, he's a nice kid. He's got Swedish lineage. How does he get into acupuncture and Chinese medicine?
So as you can probably guess, that's not an infrequent question at my office when someone walks in. And I tell you, to this day, it still is that people walk in and they look at me a little funny and they go, "You're not Chinese." And I kind of get that look. I can see it. But I think as I was in my, as you say, I'm not so young anymore, but back in my younger days, the kid that was running around looking for a way to behave in this world, a way to find a way of making a living, and then thinking about really the values that I held. I was looking for a meaningful paradigm that explained some things that I wasn't getting from what I was finding in, whether it was in the basic courses in college. And I came across a book that a roommate of mine introduced me to called The Web That Has No Weaver. And I was a philosophy student in college. And so I was familiar with the principles of Taoism and Chinese philosophy, and had studied quite a bit of East Asian religious traditions and Buddhism and the yoga, and was doing yoga even back 30 years ago. But when I read that book, it's kind of lit a little fire in my brain that there was a method, a model, an interpretive process that allowed me to see health and wellness connected to nature and connected to ways of living that supported your natural buoyancy, your natural resilience. And when I read that book, I had it in the back of my mind that if that was possible, I wanted to go study that. Now remember, this is 26 years ago, so I've been doing this at least 24 years, and I pondered that for a while, and then a friend of mine was applying to medical school, and through that, he got a little burnt out on the process and the bureaucracy and what was involved, and he said, you could study acupuncture in the U.S. Like, really? And I started looking into it, found a few schools, and there's a longer story, but basically the long and the short of that is I jumped my feet full into it, dove in, went to school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where they had a good program that offered the basic outlines of what is now called traditional Chinese medicine. And if maybe for your viewers, that might be something that's helpful for them. If They really want to know beyond just acupuncture, right? So people think of acupuncture, which is now, being utilized by just about every health provider, right? Everyone wants to get in on using acupuncture, whether it's physical therapists or chiropractors or all of them. But historically, Chinese medicine, acupuncture is just one of the one of the therapies within what's called the 5 branches of Chinese medicine. And that's what you study in school. And that was a lot of fun diving into all those areas of Chinese medicine that you can that relate to herbal medicine, botanicals, the nutritional dietetics of Chinese medicine, what's called Tui Na, which is a kind of physical therapy or acupressure. And then the thing that I got most excited about when I first started studying is they didn't separate the mind and the body, that they saw that clearly there was no delineation between where these began and how our physical health affected our emotional health and vice versa. And that was so sane to me. That's my experience, and I think that's every person's experience. But we live in a culture that divides that, and then is built upon methods of manipulating, our biology to try to correct imbalances. And not that that doesn't have its place, but a paradigm that includes mind and body was beautiful to me, and is still the most elegant, sophisticated, interpretive model of health I've come across.
Absolutely fantastic. You had so many amazing nuggets in there too. And it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to people practicing outside of their lanes, because people can say, hey, listen, Jack Wolfson, you're practicing outside of your lane. You're a cardiologist. And now you're talking about all this natural stuff. But I think obviously when you're talking about the 5 branches of traditional Chinese medicine, that, you go to somebody who's the best trained at it. Now, why should someone be concerned about, hey, listen, Robert Koagedal, he's not Chinese, therefore I'm going to go see a Chinese doctor because they're better at it, or maybe they even went to China, or they went to some of the schools in China. How is the educational process any different? And is Robert just or is the American trained doctor in general, not just necessarily from Sweden or not, or the white guy, traditional guy, as good as the guy from China?
I had this really fun patient just a week or so again, big guy, 6'4", 240, never had acupuncture before. And he said when he walked in, he kind of looked at me a little sideways. He's like, well, my girlfriend said I shouldn't go see some white guy practicing acupuncture, but I looked at your site, and so I'm here. And that is not an uncommon interpretation that people have. But what I think is maybe missing in the cultural understanding from Americans looking for someone who's an expert in Chinese medicine. And mind you, I also don't have any real problems with people practicing outside the lanes. And I think we're learning as a culture as we go along, and what we call all of these divisions are artificial. And properly, when you think about just health, and you can apply these therapies in many successful ways. And it's not just because one person is the expert. But having said that, there's a phenomenon in which when something has been in a culture for a long time, so let's say obviously historically Chinese medicine goes from guesses of 2,000 to 5,000 years of history. And when the communists took over in China, their paradigm was a strongly anti-spiritual, an atheist perspective, and they did everything they could to remove a lot of the, you could say, the mental, emotional, and spiritual connections in the medicine. And I think when a culture has become bored to some degree with its own traditions, going to another culture enlivens it. And so when Chinese medicine then drifted across the seas and ended up in America here, I think we're in a beautiful part of where we are re-enlivening some of the deepest aspects of Chinese medicine. That's how I see it and how I want to engage with it. And so I think, between whether you go see a person who is traditionally trained in China, they've got a certain perspective and they practice it a certain way. And I'd say what I do is maybe I don't want to say a growth off of that, but it certainly takes the foundations of that, but I bring a new life to it that I think makes it uniquely American acupuncture. And I think that's going to, time will tell, but so far it's been pretty successful.
Yeah, no, for sure. Obviously, we've got a lot of mutual patients, and of course, they speak the world of you. You know, one of the things you talked about really is about how modern medicine, certainly how I was trained, where there's there's the physical body, which is encompasses the vast majority of medical doctors that are practicing that way, and then you've got the psychiatrists, and they're over in the mental realm, and
Right,
of
right.
course, the psychiatrists over there, it's all about pharmaceuticals. But I guess from a philosophy standpoint, you know, Rudolf Steiner was a philosopher in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the founder of the Waldorf School of Methodology, a brilliant, brilliant philosopher in Germany at the time. And he comes up with this whole concept of anthroposophic medicine, and really the stressing the importance of the mind, the soul, the spirit, as one with the body, and talking about them simultaneously. And it's just, I mean, that's such a foreign concept to
Right.
the medical doctor, but for you, that makes total common sense, right?
Yeah, I say the way that Dr. Steiner articulated it, and I don't understand all of his principles, but the one that we both have heard from him is his famous statement that the world will not evolve further until they recognize that the heart is not a pump. And, you know, that summary tells you that when we're stuck in the, you could say, scientific determinism, when we're stuck in this view that this is just a bunch of random stuff. But what's very interesting, and this ties back to acupuncture, is what organizes that? What is the intelligence that organizes this entire physiology? And now the Chinese obviously call that qi, and there are variations in the Chinese philosophy of how that manifests, both in our organ systems, in the mind, and the body. But the principle there, I think, for all of your listeners is that that division that has been created in our culture is artificial. It's a stamp of a mindset that says these are not related. And in many ways, there was a rebellion against religious authority that I think was a helpful way of getting, you know, kind of religion out of my health. And I think that's a long history lesson, but the principle there is that it led us down a road in which maybe we threw the baby out with the bathwater. And there's a lot of things that we're missing in our current healthcare system that I think the practices of chiropractic, the principles of Chinese medicine fill that void for patients when they go to see their physician and they're looked at just like a bunch of chemicals. And I think that void, otherwise I wouldn't be in business. You know, I think at this point when you go see someone, you're, you know, out of network kind of process, and people return because of the benefits they get in addressing them as a whole person.
Yeah, you know, when you say that term, you know, I guess in the network, it just makes you think
Right.
about just like, you know, you're in like the medical matrix, just
Yep.
in like that medical model, and you're just lost in there, and sometimes you don't know any better, you don't know any different, you don't know that
Right.
anything else exists. And, you know, to jump into the space that we're in, the causation space, the holistic health and wellness space is really, really tremendous. So, why should someone go to see a traditional Chinese medicine provider slash, you know, who provides acupuncture? Why should we go? Is it everybody should go, or should we go for a specific reason? Tell me.
I think categories of challenges that people face in their health outside of the context of emergency situations, right? Because obviously from our conversation here, I hope no one leaves with the idea that somehow I'm anti-Western medicine. There are genius applications of Western medicine that the world, you and I would both want should we need those services. And applied in that context, it's, you know, I want well-paid surgeons who know how to do things that they've practiced hard at to get to that. But when you get to those areas of chronic health concerns where people are struggling with subpar health, fatigue, headaches, sleep issues, mood disorders, digestive complaints, where the only offering that allopathic medicine has is some type of patchwork, band-aid, pharmaceutical. I think it's almost becoming cliche now to criticize this, because I think the cat's out of the bag, that's a very unsophisticated and really a view of who we are as human beings, and to be treated that way when you go to your doctor and all they say is, "Well, take this pill." Most people are waking up that that's a bunch of nonsense, right? And you and Heather were obviously powerful voices in my early starting of this, where you guys challenged that paradigm and said, "This is a bunch of nonsense and we need to do better." So, you guys have always been an inspiration to me in how vocal you are in challenging that. Believe me, I have plenty of physician friends, and I know that sometimes they don't speak up when they challenge those things, and that's for a variety of other reasons. But I think we're getting to a place where, for someone who's looking for wellness, who's looking for why are they subpar, why is their health subpar, why are they not optimal, why are they not in a state of full functioning, which is their gift of being alive as a human being, then this can be a place to begin. It's not the only place, but this is a place where within Chinese medicine, we have an interpretive model that sees the relationships between those various confounding sometimes symptoms, whether it's the gut issues that you have, that you're not sleeping that great, how's your sex life, how all of the, you could say, what does it mean to live deep with your highest energies? And I think acupuncture and Chinese medicine is a tool for addressing those.
So, you bring up obviously a fantastic point, and that we both agree on, that in an emergency situation, you're probably not going to your chiropractor. You're probably not going to your traditional Chinese medicine doc, acupuncturist. You're not going to your holistic cardiologist out in Arizona. Right. You're going to go to an emergency room, and that's where we go for emergencies. But I've often said, when it comes to prevention, the medical doctors have nothing. We know that, right? Aspirin's not a prevention. Statins aren't prevention. The testing they do aren't prevention. It's all cover-up, Band-Aid approach. Maybe there's some, obviously early diagnosis for whatever that's worth, which is typically nothing. So is it safe for me to say that someone, I know the answer to this, but I want you to agree with it. It's safe to say that a traditional Chinese medicine doctor like yourself, could you be the primary care doctor to a 48-year-old guy like me?
I think that's a great question. I'd say currently the way that I went through training and the way that most acupuncturists currently, I think there'd be a little more sophisticated training in the biomedicine that would be required, at least from this side of it, right? Other professions, whether it's naturopaths or chiropractors, I don't know what level of they're willing to work at and take the responsibility of being a primary care provider for that. But I'd say, if we maybe move to a better way of looking at education and including, again, a holistic paradigm within that for the primary care provider, I'd say absolutely, yeah.
Well, let me say this, Doc. All right, let me say this, Robert. You've seen thousands of people.
Yep.
What percentage do you think right now consider you their primary doc?
That's a good question. I would say a good percentage of them will now come back to me before they go seek the advice of their primary care physician, in which they're going to try to evaluate their health in a way that deals with it naturally, and they will definitely return to my office. Maybe some of them whilst going, just for kind of to check in with their doc to see what their advice is. And I advise that because there are things that I don't do and that I don't check for that either a well-trained and integrated physician or primary care doctor does do. And so I'm not looking personally, and I know this has been a part of what you've been, I think, advocating as a cultural shift, is chiropractors becoming primary care physicians and taking on that role, and I think that's great. I'm not sure that I personally want that role yet, only as it results to what people's expectations are and the legal ramifications of that are. That to me,
fair enough. So what you're saying is, best scenario is obviously you work in conjunction with a holistic health provider, whether it's MD, DO, naturopathic doc, and as far as I'm concerned, obviously, doctor of chiropractic. And I think, really what it comes down to is also, finding the individual person, because I think obviously with your knowledge, your expertise, people would have a very good comfort level with you than someone maybe that's fresh out of training. So I think when I probably asked you that question, you're probably a little concerned, saying, wait a second, I know some people that probably, that are, TCMs, traditional Chinese medicine providers, and yeah, they probably should not be the primary care.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd say that's where we're at in the educational system now. You spend 20 years seeing a lot of people, get pretty comfortable in seeing, when something requires referral and when, you're able to address something. So that's more just from experience. But just for this conversation, I would say there needs to be a little bit of a further level to that, to be in that position personally. There might be other acupuncturists out listening to this and go, no, I'm ready to do it. But I think that's where we're at in terms of the system.
I appreciate that honesty, and I think that provides valuable information. So tell me, so somebody calls up your practice, and we'll have all your information in the show notes. And I mean, this is going to go to people all over the world. And for anybody who wants to come out and see, Robert Koagedal in Arizona, I know that he would be willing to see you. You better book well ahead of time, because I know he's a busy man. So I make an appointment, and I show up at the first visit and say, hey, I feel fine. And my best friend sees an acupuncturist in Chicago, and he said, go check it out. What happens on that first visit?
Well, that first visit is then filling out a barrage of questions that deal more with the subtleties of your health, from whether or not your sleep issues, from whether or not your digestive complaints. And we put together what I call a collage of the various check marks that stand out on your inquiry, on your intake, that lead me to developing what's called a symptom picture. That means we have a collection of your current symptoms in the 10 questions, what's called the 10 questions of Chinese medicine. And we put that together. And through that, we develop a plan of applying acupuncture, applying the principles of healthy eating, applying the principles of learning how to move into parasympathetic. I think stress plays a pivotal role in a lot of the deterioration of our health, and learning skills that the otherwise healthy person can use as prevention. Because this gets back to what you said earlier in your question, was in Chinese medicine, the highest practice of medicine is prevention. And the ancient way of saying that is that you don't dig a well after you become thirsty. And so that line of thinking is exactly what got me inspired into this medicine. And to me, if we are going to do anything to address the fact that we're headed towards 20% of GDP spent on healthcare, which is going to economically bankrupt our country, we need to have a better model to understand prevention and work from that place, and not just fix it when it's about to go out of, and explode.
So how do you say that in Chinese, that we shouldn't dig a well after we're thirsty? What is the translation of that? All right. And I think that, if there's any kind of overriding theme that comes up so often, Robert, is that this autonomic balance, and how important that is to every organ system, and of course the brain, and how the autonomic nervous system that's coming from the brain, sympathetics, parasympathetics, how that all comes into balance. And tell me why we're in such sympathetic overdrive, and then where does traditional Chinese medicine come in to balance the autonomics?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. Now, I call that problem the hardware and the software problem. And for me, if I'm evaluating someone, it's almost the question is, where is that central imbalance coming from? What's the center of gravity of where their health problem is arising from? And obviously, if your hardware is off, that is, if you have hormone imbalances, or and if you're what we call your software program, meaning if your story is that everything is out to get me, right? That you're always in a state of interpreting your environment as though there's a threat. Either one of those are going to lead to imbalances. And if they're otherwise, doing well on their nutrition, they get enough sunshine, and they do a lot of good things for their health, but they're still struggling, then we learn meditation. We learn the practices and techniques and tools. When you come in for acupuncture here, this isn't just about sticking you full of needles. When you lie down with acupuncture here, the therapy is to help guide your entire autonomic nervous system into a state of parasympathetic. And that translates biologically into powerful healing for your immune system, the entire system. So the acupuncture therapies here are offered in a way that don't even sidetrack the fact that if you aren't able to, more often than not, go into deep states of relaxation, you're going to reach burnout. And that burnout state we see in our culture at large, writ large. So I work in that sense individually with people to help address those things through learning those tools and techniques, and as well as addressing what I call the hardware issue. How's your lifestyle? Do you sit in front of a computer all day? Do you get up? Do you get enough sunshine? Are you drinking structured water? Are you, you're doing your grounding? All the kind of fun lifestyle stuff that I like to teach on mitochondrial medicine. So, yep.
Fantastic. So the first appointment, they would typically include some form of acupuncture therapy as well on the first visit, or what?
Yeah, so we'll sit down, we do the classical, what's called reading of the pulses, looking and evaluating the tongue, the 10 questions, getting a whole story, get their history, and really learn what their goals are, get a sense of what their vision is for their health, look at what they've been doing, what they've tried, who they've seen, what medications they are on, what's worked, what hasn't, and really try to develop a step-by-step plan on the cumulative things they can begin to put one foot forward for, to really change the dynamics of their health and to begin to get results. Because no one comes to see me consistently and paying me their hard-earned money unless they get some transformation, unless something changes. That's the beauty of having an outside the paradigm practice when it's a cash business, is that you have to get results, right? People don't come running back to me if they have found that after a certain amount of time they're still struggling with their health. So I'm motivated to evaluate really all the areas that I think are powerful ways of changing your biology and your mind and getting back into balance.
So as far as food in traditional Chinese medicine, you'll have to let me know where things are and kind of what the interpretation or how you approach it is, because obviously we both go to the farmer's market, we both go to Whole Foods, where we know that organic and pesticide-free produce, if we eat seafood, it's wild. If we eat meat, it's free-range, grass-fed. But where do the Chinese kind of come in on, and how do you look through their eyes at the individual patient from a nutrition standpoint?
Well, that's a good question too, and you could say that maybe my views on that have evolved even beyond the Chinese medical perspective, and taken account of what a lot of the science of nutrition tells us about moving beyond the calories in and calories out model, and understanding that quality is paramount, and that eating seasonal is central, and eating local and seasonal is key to that. So I take a lot of cues from a person too, from Dr. Cruz, in understanding that all food is tied to the photosynthetic web, and that if you're eating outside of that, that can lead to circadian imbalances. And so I promote, you could say, a seasonal, local form of, if you want to call it paleo or keto, that is built around what your gut system, what your biology tells me you're designed for. And
but if
so
someone comes into the traditional Chinese medicine, doc, I mean, tell me, I mean, what could, I mean, I know what, obviously you told me what you think, and I know that obviously about you, but what about if they go into somebody else who's recommended? I mean, where do the Chinese, I mean, they spend studying this, for thousands of years. Where do they come in with nutrition?
They offer, you could say the Chinese dietetics is, you've probably heard of not putting ice in your water and not drinking a lot of cold fluids, because this is considered, my big gut here, this is considered to be the conversion of food into chemical energy requires that your digestive system is able to do that efficiently. When you become inefficient for whatever reason, and you don't properly break down your food, it's going to become what they call phlegm or damp phlegm. And that's the language that's used. I tend in my practice to have moved beyond some of the classical Chinese language in describing things, because when I say that to people, they look at me funny, but that is the language associated with inefficient digestion leads to buildup of damp phlegm, and if that goes on long enough, it'll cause a lot of problems. So if you went and saw someone, for example, who was maybe still a Chinese practitioner, they're going to recommend things like kanjis, which are like these cooked soups. So they're big into soups and stews and a lot of those foods. But I think still within the Chinese dietetics, it even gets back to circadian rhythm and eating locally and seasonally. That's kind of the overall principle. So if anyone went to do that, hopefully that's what you would get. And, you know, stay away from sugar and processed food and all that kind of stuff. But I think what you and I are thinking about, or at least where I'm headed, is even beyond the food paradigm, right? So even moving into more of an understanding of light imbalances and what those are doing to us currently in the modern world.
I most certainly agree, obviously, and there's a lot of people who believe that food is kind of lower down on the rung of importance, and at the very least, it would be
hierarchy. Yeah.
It would be in the third place, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, 1 and 1A is sun, and then of course sleep. And I'm not really sure which one's more important. But I would definitely have to say, obviously, that if you take a person who's on the best diet yet doesn't get sun and doesn't sleep, they're in trouble. And I think they're in more trouble than the person who gets the sun, gets the sleep, and even though they're eating junk food. But let's just say that they're all three very important, and we agree with that.
We can agree on that, yeah.
Robert, what does laboratory testing come in to your wheelhouse, or things that you look at, or if you will, consider, with the individual patient?
So that's another great question, and this does get back to when you go to school for Chinese medicine, which historically the highest degree offered was a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine. As of about 7-8 years ago, they started offering a doctoral program. And I don't know the level of where those people get into towards learning testing and stuff, maybe like a naturopath or that. I don't do labs or order labs. So that's why I would say I work more with a integrative physician or a naturopath if someone wants to get that more information. And that would stand back to your original question of how I think if someone wanted to practice Chinese medicine as you could say a primary care provider, that would be something that would be wanted as a regular part of your initial visit and et cetera. But it's not at my office. So they will have had that from their doctor.
Okay. What, I think that, when it comes to supplements, obviously everybody is concerned about the quality of the supplements, the integrity, the history of the company. If I go to a traditional Chinese medicine provider, and how do I know that their supplements are quality? There must be, the best of the best companies where I have no doubt that you carry the best of the best Chinese supplements. How do we know?
That's another great question. And to that, there is a bit of selection involved in which you have to discern and research the companies and where things come from. I tend to have moved towards American companies, so I carry a lot of standard process, which was actually kind of where the chiropractors, I think, were very much forward thinking and using that company, and they saw the market for a lot of acupuncturists coming out of school, and so they've really tapped into those formulas. So I've been to the farm, I've done the tour, I've seen that a good portion of their products are effectively dehydrated food and concentrated. And so the way that they have applied the different formulas that they have are very much in sync with the Chinese principles of applying botanicals and herbs. So again, not to hopefully any of my friends who are out there and own Chinese herbal companies, but I don't use a lot of those. I'm going to use standard process. I'm going to use a lot of the nutraceuticals that are probably more in the bag of, say, naturopaths or others that use different supplements within that. And I really just gear it towards each patient, depending upon what their needs are. So on that note, I stick to things that are mostly American. I haven't witnessed where it was grown in terms of Chinese botanicals. I'm confident that they do go through various testing processes that render them at least healthful. but I don't have the ability to check those claims. So I try to stay away from those personally.
Got it. You know, one of my favorite supplements, and I know you use it in your practice as well, is berberine. And berberine, of course, has been studied by the Chinese for 75 years, at least in the medical literature, and probably for thousands before that. And what it does for all, just overall health and wellness, what it does for lipids. Sorry, go ahead.
How do you use it?
So berberine to me, I think it's like the Swiss Army knife of supplements. It does everything. If you go into the medical literature and you've got a health complaint, whether it's cancer, there's hundreds of studies on berberine and cancer, hundreds of studies on cardiovascular and lipid modification, blood sugar modification, of course, tremendous antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, and anti-aging supplement on what it does as well. Helps. There's evidence that it helps to heal leaky gut. So I mean, there's nothing. It's not that it itself is magical, but it's just what it does to the enzymes of the body, and it seems to upgrade all the good enzymes like AMPK, and it's a NRF2 activator. Yet it also inhibits NF-kappa B and other things that tend to be pro-inflammatory and pro-disease.
Right. Yeah, excellent. I think the application historically, Chinese medicine is going to apply what's called a formula, which is to say herbs are then used in conjunction with each other, because historically some herbs were, mildly toxic and followed the principle of hormesis, that a little bit of a poison is actually health promoting. And so they had very sophisticated formulas. And I think that in order to get back to that, I'd love to see an indigenous American way of interpreting our local botanicals that can take the logic and thinking of Chinese medicine and then give us confidence in how they're grown and where they're grown. And I think that would be a really cool thing, just kind of as a fun thing to do. And some people are doing that, and some herbalists that I know that are master herbalists, like Andrew Gaddert and others, have great companies that they're even adding some of those things locally here. But yeah, you're right. I think plant medicine shows up as having vast array of healing opportunities, and applied correctly is a beautiful healing tradition. Yep.
Fantastic stuff. Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Koagedal. Robert, how do people find you? They can obviously, I know you've got a lot of clients that are from all over the country, if not out of country. How do people find you?
They just go to our website. I think that's probably the simplest way. They can access that if you put that up. That's AcuHealth, ACU Health AZ for Arizona, AcuHealthAZ.com. I think that's a great way to have access to our information, learn a little more about our practice. Hopefully this gives them an introduction to the services we provide here. Hopefully how we can answer any questions. They're welcome to give a call. Mary up front's gotten pretty good over the years at addressing some introductory stuff, but I'm happy to give patients a call back and see how we can be helpful and learn more about personally what they're interested in.
So that's how you introduce your wife there, saying Mary over the years has gotten pretty good.
She's gotten good at how to give patients an introduction to what we're doing. Yes, and she's actually great at it, I should say. I'm sure she's saying Robert has gotten a lot better over the years too. Fantastic. Robert, always a pleasure. Say hello to everybody. And for now, another episode of the Healthy Heart Show with Dr. Jack Wolfson, board certified cardiologist, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Jack.